Good evening and welcome to Connect to Escape. My name's Kara Sterling and tonight we're going to be discussing how to make the most of life. What exactly is a successful life? If we choose to live by certain values and adopt certain principles, can we lose our identity and actually end up living a life of unfulfillment? These are the issues we're going to be discussing tonight on Connect to Escape. Joining me this evening, we have some special guests. We have Andrew Leyland, who is the Director of English at Newbold College, Sophia Peart, who is currently a student of theology. We have Patrick Johnson, who is currently a doctoral student at King's College, and we have John Olare, who is a recruitment officer at Newbold College. This evening, we're going to be discussing how to make the most of life. And we went out to the public and we asked them what they considered to be a successful life. Let's find out what they said.
What would be a successful life for you?
Being happy, not necessarily having lots of money, but being happy with my family like I am now, secure job, and fairly healthy living as well. And, you know, being healthy myself as well as anything else. So, yeah, to me, that'd be my successful life.
Being happy.
Oh, happy relationships with other people and enough money to be happy, that's all.
One where you fulfill your dreams without harming anybody.
A successful life, I suppose, achieving your goals, whatever aims you have, and being successful in reaching those aims.
That's a very hard one, because people think money and wealth, they are success. But success, it may mean family, love. That's it.
Successful life is when you're comfortable with yourself and you, at the end of the day, you're happy that you have made somebody else happy as you are.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye. And how would you define successful life?
Having a dream and following it.
Happiness. I don't actually know. I haven't actually thought about it that far, to be honest.
Helping others.
Okay.
Helping others to fulfil their dreams. I class that success.
Okay.
If you can fulfill your dreams and help others do theirs, that's a success.
Successful life. I suppose just making my way through it. Making my way through it would be good. Living a long time would be good.
Okay.
And I don't know, succeeding in any dreams and aspirations I've got would be a bonus, I suppose.
Okay.
For me, successful life would, completely without a doubt, it would just be in doing what I can for the people I care about in my life, the people who mean a lot to me. Just try and live my life the best way I can for myself and for them.
So we heard a variety of responses there. We had people talking about happiness, about helping others, money. Patrick, after hearing these responses, what's your initial thought? What's your take back from this?
I think what struck me the most is how many people talked about dreams and goals and reaching those. In other words, success and happiness is knowing what you want and achieving it. It doesn't just come on its own without having thought about it beforehand. So it has something specific to it, and that seemed to be reflected in quite a few of the respondents and what they had to say. And I guess really what that's hitting at is we have to, in one sense, define happiness for ourselves. If we want to say this was successful, we have to have some kind of criterion for what it is. And I guess maybe there is some truth in that, really.
I think a lot of the time we actually define success by material things as well. It's whether what we have and what we've achieved and whether we've got to where we want to go. And we define our happiness and success by those outcomes. Whether they're healthy or not is a question.
Yeah.
Because they're saying happiness is something that I've got to do. I've got to do something to achieve that happiness. Rather than, I didn't hear too many people saying, who I am, what I be, what I am is what makes a successful or happy life. They're all looking for something that they need to do in order to get that.
Yes.
Which was, I guess, common to most of us. Sort of putting the onus on us to do something to get a successful life.
And there was, of course, involved in there too, how you relate to other people. So my happiness is making my family or those close to me feel happy or successful. So that seemed to be very much a part of what they were saying too. I agree with you. There weren't many that said, well, the way I am now, that's happiness. Nobody actually said that. It's always something you're striving for, but it seems as if maybe it's very difficult to actually say, I'm there right now.
So it almost sounds like happiness is just a step, you're just a step behind success and happiness. You're just a step behind it. And if you just keep on working, if you keep on moving, you may achieve it. That's what I like to be hearing.
I like the aspect of goal achievement, where you set out goals for yourself and you then reach them and you're happy or you're proud or you realize that, this is where I wanted to be however long ago. But I think that's something that goes along with happiness or a successful life is contentment, being content with where you are or where you plan to be. Because on the one hand, what I define as success may be different from, what Andrew defines as success. And I may see what his definition of success is, and I may want that instead of what I've already had in front of me. And no matter how hard I try, I'm not going to ever achieve my level of happiness or success because I'm constantly looking, over to you or somebody else's. So I think a level of contentment has an aspect.
It's a very important point because I remember after the 2012 Olympics, there was a lot of talk about those gold medalists and what happens after that. So once you've reached the pinnacle of what you've always set up as this is my goal and you have got the gold medal, what happens then? And there was a lot of talk about people needing quite a bit of psychological help because all of a sudden it was as if life had less meaning to it. I've reached the ultimate, what happens now? And you're only 25 and there's like nothing left to life. So contentment is really quite an important thing because otherwise you can reach that point and then you just fall off the end and say, now I'm going to be unhappy for the rest of my life because I've reached the ultimate goal.
It's so popular with especially in sport, people who sports has a short life. You retire, football players in their 30s, some sports younger, and then nothing, a void, and life, everything has been achieved in that short time. So for me, it's about not reinventing, but seeking and searching to constantly want to better your life. And life is a journey, and we can, a certain part, the early part or the middle part doesn't define the whole life. It's just part of that journey. That's how I would see the search for happiness.
And I guess part of the challenge then is if you are too goal focused, once you get there, are you then able to make another goal, or does that kind of end everything for you once you've reached that.
So what we're starting to find is that there is a distinct link between success and happiness, and it all is driven by our goals and our ambitions, the people around us. And we're going to start, delving into this a little more. But before we do, we're just going to take a little time to enjoy some music.
So much pain all over the world, and it's time to heal the world. We must do all that we can do to show someone love and pull them through. That's what we should do. We all have time to offer a hand, oh Lord, and help it stand. Father, we can. Strength to feel you're right here with us as we kneel. It's time to heal. Time to heal, yeah. Time to heal. Oh, Lord, yes it is. The day will come when we will say, Lord, what are the things you want me to do? Here's what I'll do. I give you my all, and I'll pray that you'll keep me this way. We all have time to offer a hand, oh Lord, and instead, Father, we can. Oh Lord, we pray. Show us the way. Oh Lord, give us the strength to feel you're right here with us as we kneel. It's time to heal. Time to heal, yeah. Time to heal, oh Lord, yes it is.
Well, that was a very powerful and soulful rendition. I thoroughly enjoyed that. This evening we've been discussing success and happiness and, whether we can live a life of fulfillment. So I'm just going to come to Sophia now, and I just want to find out from you about your own personal experience about this this search for success and happiness. What's your take on this?
Sure. So in my family, success began with the move to England. So my grandparents came to England, and that was seen as something successful to do because we were from the Caribbean, and coming to England was really important because their success would help the family back home. And my grandfather worked very hard to actually bring the rest of the family over here. And when my mum and dad did come here to England, success for them was to find a job, buy a house, and settle down and have children. And obviously, I came into the picture, and my brothers. Now, for them moving from Jamaica here, it was really important that their success, or our success, was about building a better life. You know, building a better life and building our roots here. So education was really important, and making sure that we went through and had a good education. We had extra tuition classes, we had music lessons, we had singing lessons, you know, just so that we would be successful in life. I remember the actual push, actually, when we were at music lessons, and we didn't just study to play the piano, we studied to play also the organ and the recorder, just so that we could pick up different instruments. And for my mom and my dad, that was seen as successful. You know, they were growing up their children successfully. Going into my teens and looking at what do I want to do with my life, where do I want to go, I realised that I really wanted to go to university, because that would be successful. I would be the first girl in our family to actually go to university and study. So I went to university and studied health studies, and finished my degree, which was a success, graduated, which was another milestone of success, and then started on my career ladder. Now, my ultimate goal was to actually be a service manager within the NHS, and that was my dream. And I remember starting in the NHS, my first job, but also looking at the job that I wanted to achieve, and over a period of 5 to 6 years, working towards that dream. And in the background, I also had my list of other achievements. You know, I wanted to learn to drive. I wanted to pass my driving test. I wanted to save enough money so that I could pay off my student loan and put a deposit down on a house. So all of these things were things that I defined as success. Now, I came to my late 20s, and yes, I'd passed my test. I'd got my car. I'd paid off my debts, I had a deposit for my house, and I was actually sitting in my house in my early 30s. I become a successful service manager also, and moved from service management into project management, which was another defining part of success for me. But then I realised that I wasn't feeling as happy as I thought I would have felt with the success that I had dreamt about. So I had all these things now that I'd planned, and these things that I'd been working towards, but I wasn't happy anymore. There was something missing. There were also, though, some things that I'd like to achieve, but they just weren't happening, you know? And it started to really frustrate me. And I remember taking some time and saying, Lord, and talking to God and praying to God, because that's really, really important for me, and asking that question, why am I not happy with all the things that I have? And I realised that things don't make you happy. Really, things, all of these things, as beautiful as they are, as wonderful as they are, it was great to have some letters after my name. It was great to drive a great car. It was great to live in a brand new house and to wear a suit every day to work. But it didn't define my happiness and make me happy. I had to search and ask God, what is it? What is it that you want me to do? And it's in that searching and it's in that asking God that I realised that my contentment and my happiness was found in the purpose that He had for my life. And that was to live my life in the way that He wanted me to live, to help others, to make others happy. And that gave me a sense of peace when I started to realise that. I started to feel a lot more content. And I started to move my life in a direction of faith rather than trying to achieve all of these goals. Recently, in the past 2 years, I've moved. I've moved out of my job. I've moved from my job. I've moved from my home, and I'm now studying theology to be a pastor. And I realised that this is something that will give me true happiness. I don't have the ambition to be this or that. If that happens, then so be it. But what makes me happy now is knowing that I'm where God wants me to be now. I'm working on who God wants me to be and wanting to be the best person that I can be today. And for me, that is what I define as happiness and success.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Sophia. So, stemming on from what you've said, we're just going to jump right in there and try and tackle some of the questions that we think people may have if they were here. And John, I want to ask this one to you. Is this concept of a successful and happy life, is it subjective to the individual?
I think definitely yes. I've long learned that I only frustrate myself when I try to convince somebody else about whether or not they're successful, or whether or not they're happy. Oftentimes I found myself, confused as to why somebody with money and status and great things, as you said, great things, material things, why they're not happy. And I've realized that, as you said, I think it's very subjective. I cannot define for anyone in this room, what defines them or what makes them happy. It's a personal experience, and it's a personal journey that can only be identified by the individual.
Do you think there are any objective markers of what could be defined as happiness or success? I mean, I'm just wondering, do people of faith tend to say, well, it's good to have your own subjective rules for what you think is success and happiness, but there are actually some objective ones as well. Maybe Sophia was hinting at it, that once you define yourself in terms of a God, maybe that's moving much more towards finding true happiness and contentment. Would you accept that maybe there's more of an objective and not just subjective?
No, I definitely think that there's objective aspects to it. Off the top of my head, I think that finding purpose or a reason for existence can almost be objectively defined as the path to happiness or being successful. Once you know why you're here and why you're doing what you do, I can't define that subjectively. I think that that's something that can be applied across the board.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that there's other ones and other themes and ideas that can also be.
Because I think a number of writers all throughout history have kind of felt that the best way in which to find some contentment and true happiness is outside of ourselves. It's even to define ourselves, it's best done away from what I can achieve and who I am. And it's when you start moving in that direction that that's when you truly start getting to the depth of understanding what happiness would be. So many writers have come to that conclusion, I think. Yeah.
So can I come in and ask then, can we live a full and happy life if we don't have a faith?
I think to a degree you can. I mean, I've lived a life in faith where I am now in my life. I've also lived my life out of faith with no sort of fixed or firm belief. and to a degree, you can. I think a lot of it is it's kind of like ignorance if you're not wishing to delve into that. I think one person in the clip said, "I've never thought about that before." And it depends on your personality. If you are searching or thinking deep about your purpose, meaning, and beyond this life, perhaps, then maybe you'd find it very hard to really have true happiness in this life. But I think it is possible to be relatively happy. It's evident, but not complete happiness.
Yeah, I think it depends on what we base our happiness on, and I think we discussed it earlier on in the show, that some people have placed their happiness on achievement of things, and when those things have been achieved or haven't, then it's gauging their whole life and their whole happiness. And I think having something objective, like a faith, God, gives us something, like you said, outside of ourselves, outside of our own passions and desires. That doesn't mean that achieving and doing well in sports or getting a nice car, getting a nice house won't make you happy. It's just that there is something else that's greater and bigger that fulfills you so much more.
And I think if you're to believe some of what's written in that book called the Bible, and the great leader of Christianity, who's Jesus, he even tells stories about people who would never have known him, but who had actually found happiness in serving other people. So whether or not you acknowledge that you have a faith or not may not necessarily mean that you are going to be unhappy. People arrive at the same principles in other ways.
Yeah.
And I think it was even said by some of the people too, that serving others gives a great sense of fulfillment, which is quite true.
Absolutely.
So it's not just people of faith, I don't think.
So this evening we've been discussing happiness and success, and so far we've been looking at both the social side that we get from our family and people we care about, but also the success in terms of faith. And we have Andrew Leyland with us here this evening, and Andrew has spent a lot of time researching this and putting his thoughts together, and you're going to share something with us this evening, aren't you?
Yeah, thanks, Keris. I think one thing we can all agree, sitting here and perhaps those who are watching, we only get one life, really. We might wish for more. Some may not. D.H. Lawrence once said, he said, if only we could have two lives, the first in which to make our mistakes, and then the second to profit by them. But the reality is there isn't a rehearsal for life. This is it. We're on the stage immediately, and we only have one chance. And because of that, I believe that often we do mess up our lives. Often we make mistakes, as Lawrence said, and sometimes we think it's not possible to put them right. But living a life of faith, I think that it actually is. We can put our mistakes behind us and then for the rest of our lives live a successful and happy life. A man in the Bible was written by many people, but one of the main writers was a man called Paul. And I just want to read you something that he wrote. He wrote this. He said, because of God's good things, in other words, the things that God's given to you, lots of good things, then you should offer your bodies as sacrifices, something that is pleasing to God. It's kind of a hard language, offer your body as a sacrifice, but I want to come to that in a minute. He also said, do not conform to the patterns of this world anymore, but be transformed in the renewing of your mind. So I just want to have a look at what that could mean for us in order to find happiness. I think it's important to say, first of all, that as Christians, as faith believers, we are called to be different. I think we do have to live life differently. But I don't think that means we're to be judgmental. I certainly don't think it means we should be proud. And it definitely doesn't mean that we should consider ourselves better than other people who perhaps have a different worldview to ours. But I do think we are called and we are asked, if we live a life of faith, to live it differently. And I think living it differently, a different pattern, as Paul said, that's the secret, that's the key to finding happiness in our life. But it's not always that easy to do, to be different. I'm reminded of a familiar story I'm sure you've heard, and maybe our viewers have heard as well, a story of a policeman in London who was at the academy, and he was taking his final exam just before he would graduate as a police officer. And one of the questions he had to answer was this. And the question read, "You are on patrol in London when a huge explosion happens. On investigation, you discover a large hole in the road, and inside the hole was a car upside down. And in the car, you could smell strong smell of alcohol. And sat in the car, badly injured, was a man and a woman. The woman you recognized as the wife of your boss, but she was in the car with another man. A man runs up to you to ask you if he can help, but you immediately recognize him as the thief that you've been chasing for the last few weeks. Suddenly, a man runs out of the house next to the hole in the road and shouts, 'Quick, my wife's having a baby. The explosion sent her into labour. Can you come and help?' And another voice was coming from the river next to the house where a man had been blown into the stream, and he was shouting that he couldn't swim and he was drowning. Question, describe in a few words what actions you would take." So the policeman thought for a moment, picked up his pen, and he wrote, "I would take off my uniform and join the crowd." And I think we can relate a little bit to that. Sometimes, as a Christian or someone with faith, it's kind of easier to join the crowd rather than to step out and be different. But I think we can be better than that. As faith believers, we can actually be better than that. We're not called to be a chameleon, someone who can blend in with any background. We're called to be something different, something that stands out, something that can be seen as different. I'm actually told there was an experiment with a chameleon that when they put the background, sort of tartan pattern background, the chameleon couldn't cope and sort of imploded because they couldn't change their pattern. And I think that can happen. If we admit to a faith and we follow our faith, yet we can't become different and we're trying to blend in, eventually within us we implode, and that life becomes impossible, and we're robbed of the beauty and the benefits of what it means to have a life of faith. I think that when we are Christians or faith believers, being in relationship with this higher power that we can call God, Christians will call this Jesus, being in that higher, different state of living, we are called to be different, but it doesn't mean that we become so different that we are kind of useless within society or looked on as strange or so far left field that nobody can relate to us. Because I think that when we live a life of faith, which is based on relationship, I think it brings integration with each other, even those who don't have the same faith as us. I think we can enjoy life more because we become fully human. We're following the person who we believe created us and designed us and programmed us and wired us up in a certain way. And when we connect with that power, we're being constantly led into what it really means to be Andrew, Sophia, Patrick, John, what it means to be a human. What is your purpose? And I think God does want us to enjoy our life. For me, it was one of the things when I started to explore and get interested in the Christian faith. I thought it would mean giving up a lot of things I enjoyed, things that, Christians don't do this, and, life can be it's going to be pretty dull and boring. Does it really mean standing up in cold churches singing songs that don't really work for me. But I realise that God actually never asks you to leave something that's beautiful in your life, something that is good in your life. He just adds to that beauty that you already have. And when we experience that, again, going back to it, I think that's what it really means to be fully human. How we do this, it requires an act on our behalf, I think. We said that the people in the clips are saying, I need to do this to achieve happiness. And there is an act that we need to do. I think that we need to give ourselves, give our heart, our life, give everything to God. And as Paul said in that reading I read from the Bible, by renewing of your mind, it's a continuous daily thing. It isn't a one-off thing that will bring happiness for the rest of your life. It's something we must renew our mind daily, every day, in order to really experience what it means to live life fully. And I think there's the biggest thing I can really say in order to find this is by giving God the biggest thing that we keep from him, which is our time. I think time is the most valuable thing we can give anybody. And if we can give that to God, I think through this renewing of your mind, he points us and moves us and shapes us and molds us into the people, like you said, Sophia, the people he wants you to be. He didn't want you to be a project manager. He wanted you to do this. He didn't want you to live here. He wants you to live there. And this is a theme and pattern that's throughout the history of Christianity, of God moulding and shaping people. But we have to give him our time. And often, I think of this, my daughter, sometimes she'll come up to me and she'll say, Daddy, I want to spend today all day with you. And there's never a time when I will think, let alone say to my daughter, yeah, that's good. That's good, Olivia. You could give me your time, but now I want you to go and sit in your bedroom on your own and be bored for the rest of the day. I'll never think that. If she comes to me and says, I want to give you my day, Dad, I'm going to make sure that's the best day she can have. I'm going to give her my time. I'm going to make sure that she has the best time that day. I think that's how it works with God. If we say we're going to give you our time, I'm going to give you my time, he's not going to just put us in a room and let us rot and be bored. And he's going to give us life to the full. He's going to make sure that we get the best life. It might not be the life we think or the life we perhaps dreamt or hoped for, but it's certainly going to be a life that's filled with fulfillment. And that's just one thing I would suggest. If you're struggling to find meaning, is just give God some of your time and then see what happens after that. So those are just some of my thoughts, and I hope that we all want happiness, and I think as a faith believer, true happiness can only come from one source, and that's through your Creator, the person who designed you and put you here in the first place. And through giving our time, I think the rest follows, and life can then really be enjoyed, and we become fully human.
Andrew, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. I know it's appreciated. So we're going to jump right back into discussion, debate, conversation. And Sophia, I wanted to ask you, how do we keep our sense of identity when we choose to live a certain way? So if we choose to adopt a life of faith and to seek success there, how do we keep us?
I think when we choose to live this life of faith, it doesn't mean that our personality changes. So we still, and I think God works with that. We still are who we are. It's just we're living life in a different way, in a different framework, in a different worldview. And that's how we can actually maintain our identity. I'm still British with a Caribbean background. I'm still female, you know, I still age. So those things don't actually change. It's just a different framework in which we work and live in.
When you think about your self-identification, who is me, that's often, I get that first and foremost reflected from the people I'm associated with. So I've learned who I am based on my parents and then the people around me. And so having God in the mix also kind of tells me a little bit of who I am. And that's what you find out. So it's not that you lose who you are, it's actually you find out who you really are then through that reflection from other beings, because we define ourselves actually from our interaction with other people. Yeah.
I think as well, when you are when you acknowledge that, and if you're living by a life of faith, your identity then becomes very sure to you. And I've certainly, in my experience, there becomes then no pretense or pretend play. You know exactly who you are, and you're able then to be. I think your relationships with people become far better because you are who you are. For me personally, as a Christian, I'm told through my faith that I am a child of God, and because of that, I then become who I am. I know who I am, and I also know who I'm not. And before I had a faith, that was my big problem. I sometimes thought I knew who I was, but I didn't know what I was not, and often that led me into conflict with myself and with other people.
Yeah.
I think knowing who you are as well frees you. Having that sense of identity, and knowing who you are frees you frees you from expectations. You know, you can, you know that you're not good at something, but you're good at something else. You don't have to try and be good at everything. It's just what it is. And that goes back to what we were talking about earlier on in terms of contentment. You know, you no longer have to strive to be something that you're not. This is just you.
So one thing I did want to ask as well is, just stemming on from that, you know, we've been just discussing identity. Why do you think, though, some people who choose a life of faith may feel that they cannot have the normal life, that it's no longer going to be accessible to them? Is it their personal choice, their mindset?
I think often, sometimes we look at the wrong thing, don't we? We think if I'm going to have a life of faith or become a Christian, we immediately think of cold churches and boring people who don't know how to enjoy life. I'm a Christian, and I enjoy going out to eat in restaurants. I enjoy shopping. I enjoy living life. I appreciate culture. I appreciate good TV. I appreciate good theatre. But if we're honest, that's not the impression certainly I had of how Christians live. Christians, they appear in the world for a few hours a day on their way to church and then maybe disappear again. And I think it's from we look at the wrong thing. We're looking at the wrong thing sometimes.
Yeah, I think maybe Christians are to blame for it as well, because you know there's this thing called the 10 Commandments, and it's all about you should not. And if you, who would want to start something where you're being told, well, you can't do that, and you can't do that, and you can't, you know, then you think, oh, hang on, do I really want to get into this whatsoever? And then, of course, you get Jesus coming along, and instead of all these do nots, he says, you know what it's all about? It's about loving. You know, you can sum up all of that by saying, go and love really well. Now, suddenly that opens up possibilities rather than closes doors. And so I think it depends how you look at things. Rather than it being a hindrance, it's actually opening you up to be who you really want to be.
So Andrew, if you had to really summarise this topic, what would you say to those viewing the show this evening?
So I think if you're like myself, you've got to a point in your life where you realise everything you have and what you do and who you are isn't really defining you, as Sophia said, and you're considering having a life of faith, following the Christian faith, then join the crowd, join the movement. It's a great movement to be part of. And I don't think there should be a fear. We should not fear that our life will somehow become boring or less eventful. It becomes more. The guy we follow, Jesus, says, I'll give you eyes because you've never seen before. And that's one way I could perhaps sum it up. We become a follower of Christ, we have new eyes and we see things we've never seen, and then we really experience life to the fullest.
We have had such fantastic discussion this evening. We've been discussing the concept of success and happiness, and we've really learnt that although we can define our success and happiness through our family and the things we have, our jobs, our cars, etc., there is a deeper success and happiness available to us if we want it. And I'd just like to thank our guests for taking the time to come and speak with us, to share your thoughts and opinions. And also to thank you at home for tuning in and persevering with us. It has been fantastic, and we very much hope to see you again soon on Connect to Escape.